All right, tip 38, discipline. I think a lot of owners feel that and managers feel that discipline is a bad word. It's not a bad word. Discipline is necessary. If people are misbehaving in your company or they're not doing what they've agreed to do, go back a few tips to the 7 steps of management, then there has to be discipline. People want discipline. People want to know where they stand. And I think that when you have an employee that is doing something that is not the way it's supposed to be or not what they've agreed to do, and there is no consequence, it actually weakens the trust with the employee and it weakens the employee's confidence in the company. They're kind of waiting for the axe to fall. Maslow says that the employees, all human beings, cannot focus on greater concepts until they take care of their base needs. Base needs are shelter, food, warmth. I don't love probably isn't a base need, but the greater is how do I do that job better? Science, God, things like that. And I think that when an employee doesn't know where they stand in your company, because there is no discipline until the axe falls, that they are always thinking about when is the axe going to fall and how is the axe going to fall, and they're unable then to be productive and to think about how to do their jobs and how to do their jobs more efficiently and in a better way. So discipline becomes part of a healthy relationship in parent-child, employee-employer when somebody does something that they shouldn't do. I think now we bring in what I call escalating consequences. And I think escalating consequences is a concept that many owners have not really thought about. So they wait and they wait and they wait, and then they wait some more until the employee has done so many things wrong that they're starting to be angry and build up that anger and that resentment. And then finally the employee does something that frankly is probably minuscule or maybe not even really a problem, and then the axe falls because I've built up all of this resentment and all of this anger. Instead, what I would like to do and what I'd like you to do is talk to the employee when the small thing happens and when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if you go back to the 7 steps of management, healthy management is having that communication and strategizing with the employee and coming up with solutions for either the problems of the company or the problems of the employee, and helping them kind of overcome their obstacles and figure out how to do their job in a most efficient way so that they can be successful. When we have escalating consequences, when the employee, so going back to the management process, first of all, we have to have goals, and second of all, we have to have agreement. So I've had the employee agree, we'll take technicians because it seems to be something that is simply or easily understood. There are some pretty clear goals. I want that technician to do at least 40 hours worth of billable work that I can bill my customers during the week because I'm going to pay them for 40 hours. And so that's a simple goal to sit down with a technician and come up with and get them to agree to. And there may be many, many reasons why that employee is not able to do 40 hours, some of which are my problem, the company's problem, the systems, the process, the not having the right tools or the right knowledge, and then some of which are the employee's problem, not working at a pace, not working efficiently, not pushing themselves, spending too much time on the phone, whatever that is. So first of all, I get agreement from the employee, the technician, you're going to do 40 hours a week, that's 8 hours a day. And then I pay attention, and we have a way to measure that. And when they're not doing 40, if I don't have a conversation with them, then what I'm kind of telling them is it's okay to do whatever you're doing. So if they do 35, then that becomes the new standard because I didn't say, wait a minute, 35 is not 40, and we did not have a conversation. So in essence, that first conversation is a discipline. It is the first level of discipline, and that is you're going to come in my office, we're going to talk about why you're doing 35 hours and not 40 when we agreed on 40. Now, it doesn't mean that you're at fault. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just means that we're going to have a conversation to try to figure out why 40 is a better number and how do we get to 40. If I don't say anything about 35, then pretty soon the employee's doing 32. And if I don't say anything about 32, pretty soon the employee's doing 28. And we have lots of shops where the employees, the technicians are doing, 23, 24, 25 hours a week, and no one's talking about it. We're not solving the problems. And I think that when the employee's doing 25, their self-esteem is dropping because they know they should be doing 40. They feel like they should be doing 40, but they're doing 25, and there's lots of reasons why that might be happening, some of which may be outside of their control. But even that, if we're not having a conversation about it, we're not talking about it, then we're not able to solve those problems for them or with them, and then they're not able to be successful. So the first consequence for me is that conversation of, we agreed to this, but you're not doing this. So why not? And then they're going to tell me what's going on, and we're going to fix it. So if they're not getting cars dispatched to them properly, we'll fix dispatch. If they're not getting estimates back properly in a timely fashion, we'll fix that. If there's a problem with getting the right parts, we'll try to figure that out and fix that. If it's the employee talking on the cell phone too often, then they're the one that has to fix that. But I need their agreement that they'll fix that. And so that conversation, which is a form of discipline, is a very positive thing. I think whenever an employee is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, there needs to be a conversation. Because at the very least, I don't want them thinking, well, when is he going to fire me? I want them thinking, how do I make myself as successful as possible? In my world, a lot of people want to know, well, how many strikes do you give somebody? And so in my world, it depends. It depends on how many strikes they need, and it depends on their attitude, and it depends on whether or not they're trying to solve their problems and do their job properly. If they're working hard at solving their problems and they're making progress, then I don't mind having 6 strikes or 7 strikes. If they're not, then it's probably going to be 3 strikes. So for me, the escalating consequence, the discipline was, come in my office and we're going to have a conversation about this. Come in my office a second time and we're going to have a conversation about this. I like to believe I'm a great communicator, but frankly, based on the evidence and based on the feedback, I'm probably at best ordinary, and probably less than ordinary. My wife tells me that I constantly misunderstand what she's saying or what my kids are saying, and so the feedback would tell me I don't communicate as well. From the employee standpoint, I think a lot of times I have a meeting with an employee, we agree to certain goals, and even though I write them down and I give them the feedback in their own words, they later tell me, well, that's not what I agreed to, or that's not what my understanding was. So when my employee's not doing what I want, my first thought is I didn't communicate that correctly, so we need to re-communicate. And in a way, again, that becomes my first escalating consequence. It might be my second consequence, is to re-communicate with the employee. And I'm pretty sure that no one really wants to come in my office and shut the door and have a 20-minute conversation about why they're not accomplishing their goals or they're not getting their job done. But it does happen. The next consequence, probably number 3 for me, is I still think maybe I didn't communicate clearly, so we're going to come in and re-communicate, but then I'm going to retrain. And retraining often comes with exercise. So, for example, I had an employee that worked for us, we'll call him Bill, high technician, very high D personality, very aggressive. Bill could put out 65, 70 hours a week, no problem, but Bill didn't want to follow the estimating processes the way that we did things, he wanted to kind of do them his own way. So about every 2 months or so, he would slip off the wagon and start doing things his way and cutting corners. And those corners, unfortunately, hurt the communication and they hurt the process, and they often hurt other employees, or they hurt the customer. The customer didn't get what they wanted, or it slowed things down. And so it was important that I have a conversation with Bill when that happened. And often in that case, there was busy work. So I would retrain Bill on how we estimate. And I would have, I don't know, 6 or 8 or maybe 10 estimate sheets with jobs on them, and then sheets that were filled out. And I'd sit down with Bill and I'd say, hey, Bill, now that we've retrained you on how to do this, I want you to fill these 10 sheets out. And Bill hated it, frankly, and he never quit over it, never threatened to quit over it, but I know that he hated it. And so that helped him to remember that when he was doing his job, that he needed to do the job in the company way, using the processes that were defined by the company. So that retraining, along with the exercises that went along with it, were a form of discipline. And it's funny, if you look at Bill, I ran that shop for 6 years. Bill worked for us for that whole time, and then continued to work there until he retired. That while I was there, I probably gave Bill 12 chances. At least twice a year, we probably had that very same conversation, that very same retraining. But Bill was a great employee, other than the fact that he was a little high-strung. Bill was my go-to guy. He could do anything in that shop that needed to be done. So for him, I gave him additional chances before we would have terminated him. In fact, it would have been almost impossible for us to terminate Bill, because he was that essential to the way the company ran. So, you create escalating consequences, and I think this is something as a manager, as an owner, I do before I get to the point. Long time ago, when I was a young man at church, they were teaching us a morality lesson, and they used the cliff as a metaphor for sex. And they said, if you're walking on the edge of a cliff, peering over the edge, what are the odds or chances that you could fall in off the cliff? And you have to look at that and go, well, yeah, if I'm right on the edge, the chances go up pretty highly, and there's a good chance that I could fall in off the cliff. And then they said, well, what if you're 10 or 15 feet back from the cliff, what are the odds that you're going to fall in? Well, if I'm 15 feet back, the odds are non-existent. And I think, for morality, that was kind of an interesting metaphor. But I think that's kind of a metaphor for discipline, and a metaphor for communicating with my people. I want to have that conversation with them when they're 15 feet away from the cliff. I don't want to have that conversation when their toes are over the edge of the cliff. And for me, that means that when they're not hitting their goals and targets, which are well defined, because I am a good manager, that we're having conversations and they're away from the cliff. That way the discipline doesn't have to be dire, it doesn't have to be dramatic, and it doesn't have to be final. It is difficult to find good employees. It's always been difficult to find good employees, but today, in 2019, it's more difficult than it's ever been. So as a manager, it behooves me to have a good discipline process with my employee, that I can start out small and build if I need to. Now, I've terminated lots of people in my lifetime doing what I've done as a manager and an owner of an automotive business. When terminating those people, it's always tough. It's not something that I want to do. But I've never fired somebody from a position that didn't know it was coming, because I went through the steps. First, I created goals with them. Second, when they weren't hitting the goals, we had a discussion. We came up with solutions for them. Third, we escalated the consequence. So maybe 4 or 5 times we retrained, maybe 3 times we retrained. We had busy work in there. Finally, before firing somebody, we wrote them up So you don't even get a write-up the first time you screw up in my company. You get written up the third or fourth time, depending on your attitude. I mean, hell, you could get writ up the first time, but it's not like writ. You could get written up the first time, but it's unlikely. And then we write you up a second time, and then the third time we might send you home for the day and write you up, and the fourth time we might send you home for the week and write you up, and the fifth time you're probably not going to be working for us again. I think one of the important things too, if I am sending you home for the day, if I'm writing you up, is that we have that conversation before you go back to work about what it is that you're going to do differently. And in a way, that's a discipline, because nobody really wants to have that conversation. So discipline's not a bad thing. And in fact, discipline allows people to know where they stand and allows them not to worry about the acts and when the acts might be coming. Discipline should be a normal part of what you do. It should be whenever someone is not doing what they've agreed to, which would assume that you are going to be a good manager and set goals with them, that they know what they're supposed to do within your company. Thank you for your time. As always, please give us your feedback and have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this week's tip. For more information on the concepts we discussed, check out our upcoming classes at www.ifrabe.com/classes, or listen to the Leading Edge podcast at institutesleadingedge.podbean.com, where we discuss business topics just like this one with a panel of industry experts. You can also contact us whenever it's convenient, and we'll set up a free consultation on how the Institute can help you better your business, your life, and the industry as a whole. We'll see you guys next week.